Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. Hope you're doing well. Today I bring you a tutorial on how to make a pencil skirt with pleated vent. So from the thumbnail you can already know what we're going to make. So I've already drafted my front pattern for my skirt. I have a detailed tutorial here on my channel on how to make a long pencil skirt. So I'll be linking that video in the description box. So for my back pattern, I've placed my fabric on fold and I'm going to mark out 11 inches. Okay, so this is 11 inches and that would be my allowance for my pleats. Okay, you know we're making a pleated vent, so you need some allowances for the pleats. So I'll be making 11 inches for my allowance. Okay, so after that 11 inches mark, I'll then go and place my front pattern on it, making sure that my front pattern rests on that 11 inches line. Okay, so you make a vertical line that is 11 inches wide, right? Okay, so you just make sure that you place your front pattern and make sure that everywhere properly aligns. Okay, then you then go and trim off the remaining. Okay, you just go and trim off the sides. Okay, so I'm going to show you how I cut so that you don't mistake. So after placing that on your fabric, you're going to come downwards by 22 inches or your knee length. Okay, so for this person, her knee length is 22 inches. Okay, so from there you can now take 1 inch upwards for your zip allowance. That is what I have done. Okay, just come down from the waistline to your hip line, then from there you now mark 1 inch upwards for your zip allowance, then you can cut. Right, so another thing you can do, depending on how you want the vent to be, you can come up by 1 inch, okay, from your knee line. Right, so depending on how you want the slit to be, or the vent rather, so depending on how you want it to be. So I want mine to be a little bit above the knee, so 1 inch above the knee. So that's what I've just done. I made a slant line at 1 inch above the knee. Then I'm going to cut like so. When I get to my zip allowance, I'll stop, then start cutting from the upper part. Okay, just you need to get an L shape. Okay, so 1 inch for your zip allowance and the remaining is your allowance for the pleated vent. So you go ahead and cut it like this. I want to make sure that you're seeing how I am cutting. That's why I'm not fast forwarding it. Okay, so you just see how I cut. Right, so when I get to this place, I pull it out. So you can see I've taken that out. Now this is how my back vent is going to be. Right, so I'll then go ahead and cut the sides, making sure to cut exactly the same thing for the sides. You remember it's a pencil skirt. Now ideally you're supposed to just add 2 inches to the back pattern and cut exactly the same thing, leaving 2 inches for your zip allowance. But here we want to make a pleated vent, so I'm leaving 11 inches for my pleats and 1 inch upwards for my zip allowance. I don't need more than 1 inch for my zip allowance. Okay, so but if you think you need up to 2 inches for your zip allowance, please feel free, go ahead and mark 2 inches for your zip allowance. But for me, 1 inch is just fine. I also trim off the top and make sure that everywhere properly aligns. Okay, because once you take away the front pattern from the back pattern, you will just go and start making your pleat. So you want to make sure that you cut out everything properly now before separating the front from the back. Okay, so even at the bottom part, I'm going to make sure that I trim it properly so that the front and the back properly aligns, right? Okay, so that's it. You make sure that you trim off any excesses and that the front and the back is aligned. So after that, we'll just go and go to the sewing machine. So I'll show you how to do this. So before that, just go and make a notch at your zip allowance. Okay, 1 inch, that's your zip allowance. So when I take it out, you'd see, so this is the front and this is the back. So what I'll do is to go to my sewing machine and hem the bottom. I like 2 inches hemming allowance for the lower part of my skirt. So for the front and the back, I'll go and fold in 2 inches. Okay, I'll fold in 1 inch first and another 1 inch. So I'll start hemming the bottom of my skirt now. I'll go and fold 1 inch in 2 places, okay, and hem. So I'll do it again. First fold 1 inch, then another 1 inch, then you go and stitch it down, right? So that's how to hem the bottom of your skirt. Please, this is for beginners. If you're not a beginner and you just want to know how to make the pleated vent, please, you can skip here and get to the part where we start making the pleated vent, just so that this is beginner friendly and they can actually follow us with what we are doing. So I've hemmed the bottom of my skirt. You can see, so this is for the front. So what I'll do next would go is to go and sew in my dart, right? So I'll fold it into two, then I'll mark the bust span. The bust span I'm working with is 8 inches divided by 2, that's 4, then plus half inch for that sewing, and that is sewing allowance, that's 4.5. So I've made a mark at 4.5, and the length of my dart is 5 inches. So I'll go and notch this 4.5, okay, so that the notch would also reflect on the other side. I don't have to start measuring it again. All right, so after notching, I'll go and stitch or hold down my dart. Remember, the dart length is 5 inches, so I'll hold it, fold it into two, and start stitching with half inch. When I was cutting, I left 1 inch for my dart allowance, so I'll start holding it with half inch, then taper it down to the length of my dart. Okay, you start with half inch and taper it down to nothing at the end of your dart, okay, or at that 5 inches, which is the length of your dart, right? So I also go and do the same thing to the other side. Okay, remember I notched it already, so I can see where to place my dart. I just need to mark my dart length. So like I said, 5 inches, so I'll go and make a mark at 5 inches, and I'll go fold it back into two and stitch my dart. So I'm done sewing the two darts for the front, so I'll keep it aside, then we'll go over to the back. Right, so what I'll do is to go and hem the bottom of my skirt. Okay, so you can see this is the upper part, you can see this is the zip allowance, right? So before that, I'll just go and sew in my dart first. So from the zip allowance, I'll mark 4.5, which is my dart length, my dart width, sorry, then I'll mark 5 inches, which is my dart length. Right, so I'll go and notch it just like we did for the front. Okay, you just go and notch, then you put them aside. Okay, I also flip it to the back so that I can make a mark at 5 inches, which is my dart length. Okay, so having made that mark, I wouldn't have to do it again. So what I'll just do is to put them aside, then fold into two, following the width of my dart. Then I'll go and start sewing with half inch, okay, and taper it down to nothing at the dart length. Okay, so start sewing with half inch, then you taper it down to nothing at the length of your dart. Okay, so I also do that to the other side of my skirt. So I'm done sewing my dart. I'll then go and hem the bottom of the back skirt. Okay, so you fold in 1 inch first, then you fold in another 1 inch. Okay, then you go and sew your dart all the way round. Okay, all the way from one side to the other side. So just go and stitch it all around. So after that, you then flip back your back pattern. Make sure that right sides are facing right sides and you adjust properly. Okay, make sure that everywhere is properly aligned. You can see what I'm doing. So after that, you're going to mark the length of your zip. So skirt zips are usually 8 inches long. So I'm going to come down. Okay, I have half inch at the top to turn my lining with it, so I'll come down and mark 7.5. 7.5 would be the length for my zip. Okay, will be my zip allowance. Okay, that's the length of my zip. My zip is 8 inches. Okay, so I'll come down from 7.5, right, so that I can attach my zip properly. All right, so you can see, you want to make sure that everywhere properly aligns. Okay, so remember your 7 inch or 7.5 inches. Okay, you're going to start sewing from that point. Okay, so from that mark, you're going to sew till you get to at least half inch below your below the L shape that we have. Okay, you can see that L shape, you're going to sew till half inch below it. So you make sure you back stitch like so, then you keep sewing. As I say, you're making sure to pull them so that everywhere properly aligns. Okay, we don't want to stitch and loosen. All right, so I'm going to stitch till half inch after that L shape, then I'll back stitch. Right, so when I'm done doing that, I'm going to set my machine, okay, to the widest stitch. I'm going to set it to the widest stitch of my machine, which is 5 inches for my industrial sewing machine. So I'll then follow the length that line, okay, the line you made with your chalk, that 11 inches line, okay, I'm going to sew straight, okay, using a basting stitch. That's the widest stitch on your machine, because you're going to loosen it at the end of the day, okay. It's just to hold the pieces together so that you can make your pleats, right? So just stitch it till the end, and you don't back stitch because you're going to loosen it at the end of the day. So remember, use the widest stitch on your machine, or you can even use your hand needle to tack it, okay. So when I'm done doing that, you can see I've sewn it. So when I'm done doing that, I'll go and take it to my ironing table so that I'll show us how you can make your pleats. So here on the ironing table, okay, so you can see where my stitch ran through, okay. You can see the back is also sealed, right? So what I'll do is to open up the skirt pattern, then flip the allowance, okay, for my pleats, okay. Then I'll make sure that I flip it like so, just to make like a box out of it, okay. Just fold it like this so that we can go and iron it really flat. So when I'm not using a steam iron, I like to sprinkle water on my fabric, okay. I just get a bottle water and use my needle to make tiny holes at the top. This is not focusing, okay. I just make tiny holes at the top so I can sprinkle water on it so it doesn't burn. I have a steam iron. You can see my steam iron. I actually have two steam irons, so this is where the steam would come out from, okay. So these are my two steam irons. But when I'm using a dry iron, I'm working with generator, so I like to use this my small iron, and it's not a steam iron, okay, so that my generator can carry it. So that's why I always sprinkle water when I'm using a dry iron, so that it doesn't burn my fabric. So in case you see a bottle of water at a tailor shop and you think it's bottled water for drinking, please don't drink it without asking. All right, please don't drink any water you see at the tailor shop without asking. It might be the ironing water. So I make sure I iron this really flat. You just make a box out of your pleating allowance, and then go and iron it properly. You can see the way I'm giving it very nice ironing. I also take it to the front, okay, and iron it properly. At the same time, sprinkling water on it so that it doesn't burn. Okay, I'm using generator, so the voltage is really high, so you want to make sure you be sprinkling water on it so that you don't burn your client's fabric. All right, so this is what I do. We must survive now. Anyhow, we must implement methods to make things work. So even if you're not using a steam iron, you can actually augment using a bottle, right? So when I'm done doing this, I'll just take it back to what it was supposed to be. Okay, so after this, I'm going to start making my pleats. All right, so I've actually made these pleats, and I realized that my camera wasn't capturing, so I had to loosen them and start again. The life of a content creator, it's not easy. So I will now mark 2 inches after that my line that I made after my stitch. Okay, I'll make a line that is 2 inches wide, then I'll go and stitch it, okay, from top to bottom like so. I'll be stitching only on the allowance, okay. I'll separate that allowance, okay, not on the main fabric itself, only on the allowance. So you can see I've flipped the fabric aside, and I'll sew on the pleating allowance on that 11 inch. So you can see my fabric now, I'm sewing only on that 11 inches allowance that we left. So using a basting stitch, like using the widest stitch on your seam allowance, because this on your sewing machine, because this is a temporary stitch, we're going to loosen it at the end of the day, right? So after making the stitch, I'll go back to the ironing table, because at this point you need to iron whatever pleats you're making so that they lay really flat and very nice. So I'm done stitching that down. You can see my stitches, so I'm going to start pleating now. Right, so what I'm going to do is going to put my hand or my finger. Okay, let me roll it like this so you see. Okay, so just put my hand inside in between the stitch that I've just made. You can see, then I'll make sure that the stitch line meets the midpoint, okay, of my skirt. Okay, so remember we have already sewn the first line, so that's the middle of your fabric. Now so you're going to make sure that that stitch you made, okay, rests on the midpoint of your fabric, okay, for that first initial stitch that ran across that 11 inches line. So also go and sprinkle water on it and iron it so that it's going to lay really flat, so that at the end of the day you're going to have very beautiful pleats, okay, very uniformed and beautiful pleats. Okay, so you need to iron this properly. Okay, iron. No, you can see how long I'm keeping my iron on it. So you can see, let your stitch rest at the midpoint. So after that, I also go and make another 2 inches mark, okay, starting from my second stitch. Okay, you can see this stitch line. I also mark 2 inches away from that point. Okay, mark it all the way down. I also go and make a temporary stitch or a basting stitch, okay, using the widest stitch on my sewing machine. Okay, so I'm done doing that. So I'll repeat the same process. You can see the stitch line. Okay, so I'll repeat the same process, open it up and make sure that the line of my stitch rests at the midpoint. Okay, that's why we ironed it, so that you can see the midpoint. I'll still flip it so that you can be seeing what I'm doing. So I'll put my finger inside to open up the stitch. So I'll make sure that the midpoint, okay, that stitch rests at the midpoint of my skirt. That's in between the skirts. Okay, so at the center, that's where it's going to rest, and that's where the other pleat, the first pleat I made, rested. Okay, so this is the second pleat. Okay, so you open it up and make sure that your stitch line rests at the center. Then you go and sprinkle water on it, or you steam press if you're using a steam iron. But if you're using a dry iron, sprinkle water on it and go and press it very well. Okay, so you press it very nicely and you're done. So after this, I don't make more stitches. I just go and start using my hands to pleat. Okay, so I just like to make 2 stitches to guide me, then I continue stitching and pleating with my hands. So what I'll do next is to go and mark 2 inches, then I'll pleat it like so, place it on the middle. Okay, so that's what I'll do. This is 2 inches. I'll go and pleat it like so. Okay, then I iron. So when you've made the first and the second stitch, the pleating becomes easy. So I just go sprinkle water on it and go and iron it. Okay, so you go and iron very well. So you just need the first and the second stitching to guide you on how to pleat. Once you're done with that, you can actually do the pleats without stitching it again. So I'll still go and measure 2 inches. You can see. So from that point, I'll just go measure 2 inches and then I'll go and pleat like so, sprinkle water on it and iron it very well. So this becomes easy once you've made the first and the second pleats. Okay, using your basting stitch, you can now start using your hands to pleat it if you're a beginner. But if you're an advanced learner, you can actually start pleating without using a basting stitch. But please try to make the basting stitch, it makes your work fast. Okay, so also mark another 2 inches. You can see. So I'll go and pleat like so, sprinkle water on it and iron it properly. All right, so like so, iron it very well. Okay, iron it. My generator is on, so the iron is really hot. That's why I'm not keeping it longer on the fabric. So but you need to iron it very well. So I'll mark another 2 inches. Okay, then I'll still go and make a pleat, then make the last pleat. I just have about 1.5 remaining, so I'll just go and pleat it at the same time. Okay, sprinkle water and iron at any point. Okay, at any pleat, make sure you iron. That's what's going to give you that beautiful pleat that you would have. Okay, iron it very well. So I have just one pleat remaining, so I'll just go and pleat it. Okay, I have a last pleat that's not even up to 2 inches, so I just go pleat it, sprinkle water and iron. So you can see what I'm doing at every stage. I'm sprinkling water and I'm ironing. Okay, so if you have a steam iron and you work at any stage, steam press. That's what it means generally. Okay, so I'm done steam pressing. Okay, so I'm just going to get a pin, okay, because you need to hold your pleats down. So you go and get a pin to hold your pleats down. So you can see, to pull all the pleats together, okay, then use your pin. You can see my pin. Okay, so what you're going to do is to hold it down with your finger, then use your other hand to get the middle of the fabric, okay, separating the two fabrics, okay, the two sides, the left and the right side, then you pin it down. Okay, so just keep some of my pins aside. So when I turn it to the front, you would see the pleats. All right, so when you pin it down, you just go and make a stitch on that point. Okay, just stitch it down. Okay, so just stitch. Make sure that as you're stitching, you're back stitching it so that it doesn't loosen up. So you just take it to your sewing machine and go and stitch it down. All right, so after stitching, this is what I have. So you can see I just stitched it down. This is the inside. Okay, so I stitched it down. So after that, you're going to now loosen your basting stitches. Okay, those temporary stitches, you're going to loosen them. Okay, so that's why I said use the widest stitch on sewing machine, so that when you're losing, it's going to be very easy for you to loosen. You can see where I'm pulling it and it's loosening. Okay, so I'm going to continue ripping it apart. Not, please don't rip apart, just rip out your seams, your temporary stitches. Okay, so I just go and do that and come and show you what I have at the end of the day. Okay, after taking out all my temporary stitches. Okay, all of them. Okay, all of them, you just take them out and you see what we have next. We'll have a beautiful pleated vent. So this is it. This is how your pleated vent is going to look like. I hope you enjoyed making this tutorial with me, or making this skirt with me, so you can see your pleat. So when you iron properly, it's just going to give you this outcome. You make sure that you iron it very nicely. You can see, so this is how you get your pleated vent. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please don't forget to give me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, share this video with your friends and family, and I'll see you in my next one. I love you. Stay safe. Bye.